Walking these streets with a cup in my hand, I'm passing by strangers who don't understand that I was a princess, someone's baby before. They can tell by my clothes that I'm not that anymore. When the night comes to greet me and the darkness closes in, I'm looking for doorways and a box to sleep in. The cold chills my bones and the rain makes me ill, and no one would blame me if I take one more pill. Now nobody sees me, I'm lost and forlorn, and oh how I wish I could come take you home, 'cause the light it is fading and I'm weak and confused. I've never felt so ashamed and abused. These clothes I have on me are tattered and worn. My hair it is tangled, ain't been washed in so long, and I know you won't see me, I'm lost to you now. I just wish I could come home and fix things somehow. But maybe tomorrow the sun will break through and this pain will be lifted by the mere sight of you. And you'll tell me you love me and you'll come take me away, back home to the memories that I think on each day. So I'll walk in the shadows and live for today. I'll keep my eyes open and I'll hope and I'll pray that you'll come to get me, and I hear you say, you're my little princess, and I'll take you home to stay.
Thank you, Chris, for the wonderful music. We'll hear more from Chris later. We're going to do something a little bit different today with the welcome. We're going to do a two-part responsive welcome written by Reverend Joan Javier Duval, minister of the Unitarian Church in Montpelier, Vermont. So Kim's going to help me out with this.
You are beloved, and you are welcome here.
Whether tears have fallen from your eyes this past week, or gleeful laughter has spilled out of your smiling mouth,
you are beloved, and you are welcome here.
Whether you are feeling brave or brokenhearted, defiant or defeated, fearsome or fearful,
you are beloved, and you are welcome here.
Whether you have untold stories buried deep inside, or stories that have been forced beyond the edges of comfort,
you are beloved, and you are welcome here.
Whether you have made promises, broken promises, or are renewing your promises,
you are beloved, and you are welcome here.
Whatever is in your heart, however it is with your soul at this moment,
you are beloved, and you are welcome here.
In this space of welcome and acceptance, commitment and recommitment, of covenant and connection, let us worship together. Thank you, Kim. We recognize that the land on which our church sits is the ancestral land of the United Indian Nation, a member of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I have a couple announcements. We have After, at 12:15 today, we have the writers group, which will be meeting in the kids' space, the room formerly known as the parlor. We also have Adirondack scholarship money is available. The Finance Committee, would like to announce that the annual scholarship for Adirondack is now available. We provide scholarships of $100 to $500 for various Adirondack camps, depending on the need and the number of requests we get. Priority will be given to our youth looking to attend summer camp, but consideration will also be given to those attending other Adirondack offerings. If you wish to apply, please send an email to Mary Lee at financialsecretary@uuutica.org. It should be in the newsletter, I hope, somewhere as well. Okay. Describing the camp you want, and all submissions need to be received by March 11th. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Cathy Marsh. Cathy is the manager of the Morrow Warming Center at the Cornerstone Church, right, near Oneida Square, which is where our church used to be, right in that same location. Cathy is originally from Washington State and came to Utica 30 years ago and fell in love with it. She taught piano for 40 years as a private instructor and also worked as a muralist and scenic artist for small theater companies. In the process, she began working in mosaics, and at Cornerstone started Oneida Square Public Art and Design with Pastor Mike Ballman, who has been in this pulpit before. I hope some of you were there for it. While working in the studio, people experiencing homelessness would show up, and the church began to serve them in many ways. But over time, it became clear there was a greater need for a low-barrier warming center. Working with Oneida County, the church opened up the center in December of 2020. Pastor Ballman asked Cathy if she would consider managing it, and she said yes. And we'll hear more about her experience in a few minutes. And now, our first hymn is number 348, Guide My Feet.
Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain.
Our chalice lighting is titled Welcoming the Stranger by the Reverend Julian Jamaica Soto. A child's journey far from home, fearful and brave, in need of safe harbor. Guided by this chalice, may we seek to understand the causes of flight, like the comfort of a candle flickering in a window of darkness. Let us welcome this child into our home with warmth, nourishment, and love. Would we not want the same for our own child, lost and alone in a strange land?
Good morning. I like being up here because I can pretend to be tall. I have a little foot-high stool over here, and now I'm 6 feet tall. So, yay for me. our, our story for Together Time today is called Home by Tonya Lippert and illustrated by Andrea Stigmeyer. When they were little, Claire and Wes had the brown house. They called it home. Stairs led to treasure. Tables made good hiding places. Claire tied flowers into wreaths so it would be more beautiful. Wes drew pictures for the walls. They planned adventures for today and tomorrow. When they were bigger, Wes and Claire's family had a big change with big words. Goodbye, Brown House, with nowhere of their own to arrive. Nowhere is a confusing place for a visit from friends. Claire tried to make nowhere beautiful to her, but nowhere kept changing. Claire stopped trying. Wes ripped up his pictures. After nowhere, somewhere came, a place to stop and wait. Somewhere was better than nowhere, and anywhere. Claire and Wes still planned adventures for today and tomorrow. Wes and Claire imagined their names first on a list. The leaves changed colors. Claire and Wes followed their swirling and twisting to school. Claire played make-believe games with her friends. Wes raced with his. Both kept the shelter a secret at first. Claire worried her friends would worry. Wes worried his friends would forget that even though he had no house, he was still Wes. When the nights were lines and strangers, Claire and Wes found comfort where things made sense, where answers were easy. Even when kids asked about things that made no sense and the answers were hard, like, how come you live there? Are you poor? Do your mom and dad work? The questions kept Wes and Claire from pretending nothing was lost and helped them remember what would always be with them wherever they were. When they moved into the blue house, Claire and Wes learned that some things never go away, and that what you can count on most is love and each other. Soon, when the time of big change seemed long ago, Wes and Claire danced inside a house strong, warm, and bright. Claire tied flowers into wreaths. Wes drew pictures for the walls. They planned adventures for today and tomorrow. But they never forgot what it was like to be nowhere, somewhere, or anywhere. And that's the end. There's a little bit of back matter. If you're interested in that or taking a closer look, I will have this book in the back. This was Home by Tonya Lippert.
Good morning. My name is Cathy, and I never know what my title actually is because it's usually the person who does what needs to be done, whatever it is at the moment. So I do a lot of different things at the church. I work in partnership with Pastor Mike, and I kind of fell into that, which has been kind of the story of my life. I have, as you heard, I taught piano for 40 years, and I also was an artist. I did them both back and forth. So I've done a lot of large wall murals and theater work. And I don't know when I liked painting big. I like painting anything. And then when I went through a really tough time in my life, probably about 20 years ago, I started working in mosaic because mosaic to me became an analogy for brokenness and how broken things that feel totally destroyed can be something else beautiful and new. And in that, because for some reason my mouth says yes about things that I have no clue what I'm doing oftentimes, we started having community meetings in the church about how we could help the neighborhood because there was lots of litter and there was lots of simple things that we can make it better. Because Pastor Mike has always said that you should improve the place where you're at and reach out to it and listen to it. And so they were talking about litter and how could we add more trash cans and how could we make a trash can something that somebody would want to throw trash into. And so they said, well, maybe we could paint them or maybe we could do this. And I said, well, maybe we could mosaic them. And that's how that started. And we did that. Started with 6 cans and we had different artists design them. And then we made them into mosaics. And in that process, we're always looking at social enterprises for people that have barriers to employment. So we started Oneida Square Public Art and Design. And I don't know how many trash cans we put together, but quite a few, as well as smaller projects. And we started the art studio and we kept taking over room. And I never have enough space. I'm always looking at space because I could use a lot of space, but to make things. But we do have a studio. We recently moved it from where it was down to what used to be called our game room. I guess many years ago in the church, they had a bowling alley there. And so there's a little portion of that in that game room. And we just moved down there. So we make mosaics and we break things. And I joke about that I'm the easiest person ever to get gifts for. You just give me some broken china or rusty objects and I'll be happy. And people don't believe me, but it's the truth. And so that's where we started doing that. And in that process, people would show up and we started doing things like handing out blankets and things. And we just saw that there was people that were not being seen. And then of course, we started talking about having what they call a wet shelter or a low barrier shelter because most places and the shelters that we have want people to be sober when they come in. And they want them to not be on a substance or not use drugs. And if you start understanding how all that works, which I could give you a whole bunch, that can be very hard for someone. So we were saying we need a place where anybody can come and that they won't be turned away no matter what, unless they are a danger to the people around them. And that can be pretty that can be handled pretty well. And so the county started agreeing with us and said, well, during the pandemic, this people, were supposed to shelter at home. And if you don't have a home, where do you shelter? And so all of a sudden, people became very visible that hadn't been visible before, because every place they used to go during the day was no longer open to them. And most of them showed up in Oneida Square. And we started the overnight shelter, and being, again, that I say yes to things, Mike said, well, you're here all the time. Do you want to just manage that too? Because he goes, I need a manager. And I go, well, sure. How hard can that be? I can be here, make sure things are okay, and go ahead and work on my art. Yeah, it was a learning experience, because I all of a sudden had employees, and it's amazing how your life takes you on a journey, because I had worked a lot with volunteers on the theater work, because I work for small companies that need to be able to do something with a very tiny budget. So I worked with a lot of volunteers. I'd worked with a lot of different people. I had taught, so I worked with young people. So I started learning also how to manage staff. There was a lot I learned. There was a lot that I learned to do differently. People surprise you all the time. The way you were raised and your work ethic is not everybody's work ethic, and you're working overnight. So I had to not just hire people, which is fun. I had to fire people, which is not fun. And but I learned, and it became very interesting. And we were only supposed to be, for the cold season, what they call code blue, where it's 32 degrees and below. But they kept saying, there's this need, there's not enough space, we don't have enough shelters here. We kind of need you to stay longer. But they weren't sure about getting us funding, and we were all ready to close. We actually had told our staff we were closing, and Pastor Mike was going in for a colonoscopy. And on that morning, he calls me and I'm saying, what are you doing? You're supposed to be going into, he goes, I am on the table right now, but the county just called me. They closed the Obelston, they need us to stay open. And so we stayed open, and all of a sudden we had gone from like 25 people a night to 50 or 60 people a night. It became chaos in a lot of ways, because this happened with no notice at any agency. They did it immediately, and all of a sudden they had like 50 people that had no place to go, and people had pets. We had our meeting room had cats in it and cake. We were doing everything. And at that point, what we were doing became very visible to the community around us. And that's when the pushback really started happening. It was like, this is a crisis, but people couldn't see it. And as Pastor Mike said, we were very naive in thinking that people would say, oh, this is a good thing. But no, people hated it. And people hated the fact that there were people coming who were not respectable, I guess you would say, or made people feel not safe. That was the big word, not safe. And what they were really saying is, they make me feel uncomfortable. And we're not, as people, good with being uncomfortable. You have to practice being uncomfortable. And that's kind of been my life, is being uncomfortable, doing things that I am an introvert, and nobody believes me, because I do love to talk about things I like to talk about, but that's not what introversion is. I can spend days by myself. I'm perfectly happy. But I've always done things that I needed to get done, and I've gone and done things that would scare people. I drove across the country to go to classes I wanted by myself. I go to places that I want to go by myself. I don't want to miss out on things just because I may not have someone to do it with me, or because I may not know what I'm expecting and it scares me. Now, there are things I will never do because I don't want to. I'm not going to jump out of an airplane. I am not going to do weird things like that unless I'm forced to by weird circumstances. But which I should never say never because I've said never a lot. When I was in junior high, we did a mosaic with paper, and I did say I will never do this again. And I have done acres of mosaic, so I shouldn't say never. But anyway, we had this happening and we got a lot of pushback, we had people commenting on our page, people talking about how we were getting people shipped in there from everywhere, how Pastor Mike brought in hundreds of drug addicts, how people were afraid of needles, all these things. And you would talk and talk and talk until you were blue in the face to try to explain what was happening and the compassion that was needed. And I really thought, I don't know, I guess I just am always still an optimist and I think people are reasonable, but I keep trying to convince myself that they're not. We kind of see that. We're not, people are not. I heard it said that we think we are a thinking machine, but we're really a feeling machine who sometimes thinks. So, and that was, I was like, yeah, that's true sometimes. But we like to think we're rational and thinking, but most people just react with their feelings and with their view of how things are and their background, and to stop and think about, why do I feel this way? Why does this make me uncomfortable? Why do I feel unsafe? What is going on? It's kind of hard. So, just in one thing, I learned a lot. We had a really good security, safety person who taught our staff how to handle people. And the one thing that he said that stuck with everyone, there were, well, actually two. One is that everybody you see that walks through your door is having the worst day of their life. And the second thing was that anything they say to you, you cannot take personally because it has nothing to do with you. And if you can do that, you can do this well. So first few times I had confrontations that I dealt with, and people see me and they want to protect me because I'm a little old lady. And as I learned, you can have people screaming in your face and you just stand there, you don't reflect back to them what they're doing, you just stay calm, you listen, you let them get it out. You can get people to de-escalate and let them come down. It may take time, but a lot of people get, when someone's screaming at you, and they will be just like, I don't know about how many of you've dealt with 2-year-olds, but they're really good at finding what the thing is that makes you really upset and pushing that button. Well, it's the same way with people who are from the street. They will find the things that make you really upset and push the button. And so you've got to ignore those buttons. And what happens oftentimes is I have to deal with volunteers or staff and say, look, no, I've got this, you can stand back. Or work a couple of people. We have a young man from SUNY who's been working with us since he was a freshman. And he's amazing. I think he must be 60 or 70 in a 20-year-old body. I don't know how he does this, but he's also an EMT, but he's often there when I'm there, and he has the same thing. He can do this calming effect where you bring people down. And if you do that, if you let people get out what they're feeling, oftentimes they feel seen. And we all need to be seen. But people that are on the street are getting used to not being seen. People don't want to look at them. You go by somebody who's panhandling, you don't have anything, what do? You don't look at them. You don't want them to catch their eye. Well, I'm going to challenge you to wave and smile, even if you have nothing to give, because people need to be seen, acknowledged. I will say that most panhandlers aren't homeless. They are people, but that means they're not rich. But there also tend not to be homeless. Actual chronic homeless people tend to not be as demanding as you would think. They're used to not being seen, they don't want to be seen. But they do want people to know them. And what has been so much fun being in this environment, even though we're not doing the overnights right now, is just the community and the realness that you get from people who have nothing left to lose. And I love it because I hate masks and I hate pretense. And when you get with people that are just who they are, because that's what they've been stripped down to, it's really quite interesting. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't lie to you, or they won't try to manipulate you, or they won't do other things. Of course they will. They're in survival mode and they're trying to survive. So they're going to do all of that. But at the same time, they're going to be themselves as best they can be. There's just such an inequity out there of people who are homeless towards how the system works. And there's so much misinformation. On the back, there's a table with a lot of papers that I put there where you can get some more information on the myths of homelessness and what people think happens. But I'm going to tell you a story of a young man. He's one of the first people we met. He would break into our building. We don't know how he did it sometimes, but we'd find him in the building sleeping somewhere in the building, either on a church pew or on a couch in the hallway or somewhere. He would manage to get in. He just wanted a place to sleep. Well, when our people started working for it, they go, we know him. There was a couple of them that said, we know him. We went to school with him. He had been in his first year as a business major when he had a major car accident and got a traumatic brain injury. And it changed his whole life and it changed who he was. And he ended up homeless and on the street. And if you realize that it's just one thing that can change your whole life and the trajectory you thought you were on can send you out to the street, it's pretty amazing. There's a site on the paper that's called the National Law, I think it's the National Homeless Law Center, and they have a page of games, and I went through one last night, and it was about poverty, and it was about you play this and you make decisions of this woman who's making, and it's based on a true account of a woman who was making just enough to get by and buy her daughter her meds. Her rent was $1,000 a month. She had expenses of so much. She was at a job that paid minimum wage. It was in Florida, a little above minimum wage in Florida, which I found out Florida has some of the highest fees in the state. And she ended up with a traffic ticket that was going to cost her $1,000, but it got knocked down with fees to $600, but that wasn't part of her budget. And all of a sudden, everything started downward spiraling because if she couldn't make those payments, if she didn't make her rent, if she didn't make her daughter's medicine, she was making all these choices. There was not enough. And those will send you down and out into the street. I also saw a meme about how close we are. If you look at the billionaire, he lives on one side of the US and the person who's homeless lives on the other side. But you may be a millionaire, but you may be just this far and you're that far from the billionaire. We're all closer to homelessness than we are to being billionaires. And if you realize that, that becomes your first point of connection. That, you know, as they say, there, but for the grace of God, go I. You could be there. I've been very close in my life to that, sometimes with some of the circumstances that we went to, but we had family and support that was able to get us through those times. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have that, or if they do become addicts before they leave home, they're not welcome anywhere because it's very difficult to live with an addict. And one of the things we also deal with is family of addicts who feel incredibly guilty because they cannot handle their addicted family members. And one of our jobs is to say, that's okay, because you still have to protect yourself and your family. But it's terrible. And we have a mother who volunteers who lost her son to addiction this winter. And he was a very nice young man, very intelligent, very giving, but the addiction was too much and took over his life. So if you realize that when people are on the street, they're entering survival mode. They're going to do what they can to survive. That's why I say if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'm going to find people who have already been homeless because they might keep me alive. But if you realize that they usually have had significant trauma, including the trauma that they're living in, every day is trauma. And oftentimes they've come from a life of trauma. And as you get to know people, you can start hearing their stories, and some of them are pretty sad. They also are living with sleep deprivation because you don't sleep comfortably on the street, not just because it's uncomfortable, but because you're afraid of what little you have is going to be stolen from you. You could be attacked. We've had people that have had their shoes stolen off them. They do have relationships. There is community, but it's transactional. So you will have people be very close friends and then angry at each other because someone stole something from somebody else at the same time. It's always very transactional. They're always filthy. So think about it this way. When you have to go to the bathroom, you can usually find a place to go. If you're on the street, you often are not welcome anywhere. So what do? Where do you take a shower? Where do you do the simple things of human elimination and keeping yourself clean? Where does that happen? So it just gets deeper and deeper. And the more that you're out there, the longer you're out there, the longer you're likely to stay. And there are a lot of people that come in quickly, something happens, they're able to get back on their feet fairly quickly. But there are people that for some reason are what they call chronically homeless. And oftentimes it's because of a mental illness of some sort. Extreme anxiety can be one. Going to DSS, we get a lot of that quick answers, well, why aren't they working? Why don't they have a job? I want to say that most of the time, these people are working harder than any of us. They're keeping themselves alive. They're collecting cans. They're picking up metal. They're going place and place, but they cannot maintain a steady life of work. Partly because they have over time lost their IDs, everything. So they don't have that simple process that we all have of just having something that says who we are. And then also because they may have an illness, a mental illness that doesn't allow them to be on a steady path, or they may have other things that keep them from doing things like it, or if they have an addiction, that's one thing. We've had many people who got injured and ended up during the opioid, over prescribing, becoming addicted because of an injury. Or they may have an injury that prevents them from working. They may be disabled. They may be people, homelessness is very unequal, and I think it's really heavily swayed with people of color, indigenous people. It's just constant inequality. So say you want to get a job, you have to start with getting your ID, which is a process. Oftentimes people start with a sheriff's ID and then they go on. But if they have to go to DSS, you can sit at DSS for 8 hours to be waiting to be seen. Now, if you're someone that has extreme anxiety, you're not going to want to sit there for 8 hours. I don't want to sit there for any hours. I don't want to go to any government agency and sit. And if you've got all these things happening, you're going to want to leave. So what is really helpful is having someone able to go with them. Also, if you look at the paperwork, it's ridiculous. I mean, how many of you in here love doing paperwork? There can be like 8 pages that people have to fill out, and it's not clear always what it means. And if you do something wrong, then you have to start again, or something gets lost, or it's just ridiculous. And even for shelter, they're supposed to go to DSS every day to ask for the shelter the next night. They may have changed that to a week at a time, but how do you get a job if you're sitting to get shelter and you're spending 4 to 8 hours to get that paper signed so you have a place to stay that night? It's just impossible. You're in an impossible spiral. And then a lot of people have warrants because they've been picked up, because obviously they're stealing things. Obviously they're getting into some sort of confrontation, usually with each other. Rarely is it somebody, when people are saying, oh, we feel unsafe, the only unsafe incident that we had that was a knife fight that was from the Dunkin' Donut employees fighting each other across the street, but they came on ours. And yes, most of our people carry weapons. You would too if you were on the street. You'll do anything to keep yourself feeling safe. And I won't even begin to talk about what happens to women on the street, because we have young ears here, but it is not pleasant. And then what does happen to women over time is they tend to become far more reactive, far more difficult to deal with because of the trauma that they've gone through. But this is all just, I know you've probably heard a lot of these before, but that is the bad news. But how do you do good news? How do you make it better? And that's kind of where I want to be, and why it frustrates me to have to stop at trying to explain to people why people are on the street and how you should treat them, instead of saying, what can we do to make it better? So how do we do that? Well, we do it by listening first. You've got to hear the people that you're talking to. Just listening. Do you know how many people love to tell stories? Now, some of them, because of their mental illness, can be very fantastical stories. So that can be fun. I met someone who was there at the creation of the universe with other people. I mean, her story and the kind of people that are following her because of all the great depths that she knows, I mean, that was pretty awesome. I have had people that have told me many fantastical stories, but I also hear stories of their lives and things that have happened and their experiences and their kids and their grandkids, and they have connections that they want to talk about. And so that's where you start. And oftentimes you start by listening because the people who are living the experience know what they need. I had the great honor of working with the New York State Health Department this year, and I will tell you about that project in a minute. But they sent me to a conference called Putting Care at the Center, and that was talking about complex care issues, all different kinds. And one of the things that they kept saying is your experts are the people who are living it. And that's in medical everywhere. We need to listen to the people who are actually experiencing the problem instead of telling them what their problem is and telling them how to fix it. They know how to fix it. And so that's where you learn, and that's where you find out what's really happening. The other thing is asking the right questions. Instead of saying, why do you do this? Say, what happened to you that caused this response? What happened in your life? The other thing is looking people in the eye and learning their names. I have a really difficult time with names. So I make a joke out of it with the people. They will come in and say, "Do you know what my name is yet?" And I'll go, "Ugh, I should." And and I get good at it. Pastor Mike is amazing. He knows everybody's name. I don't know how he does it, but he's really good at that. But I am not as good. But if I make it funny, if they realize that I'm the problem, not them, then they think it's pretty funny when I don't know their name, or they'll give me their wrong name on purpose. It's kind of funny. Um, so it's connecting, and that's what we all need. And they say this all the time. I don't know in how many training sessions I've had, the one thing they said is people need connection. We're a very disconnected society. We're a society that's built on suffering. We think pain is a good thing. That's our ethos in our whole culture. Thank you, Puritans. Um, we have, we we think, that little joys aren't important, but we really do need them. And so connection is so important. So that's one of the reasons that our dinners have been important. We have started getting up to 100 people, so doing it nightly became too much, but we still do it twice a week. And that's how we connect with people, get to know them, get to laugh with them, become friends. I think it's awesome that I can go so many places and talk to people that most people don't know. They always go, Miss Cathy. They go, Miss Cathy. Um, it makes me feel honored when I have them stop and talk to me, tell them about their day. So one of the reasons that I worked with New York State is I applied for a grant through their COVID relief fund about a health initiative of doing an art program. Many years ago, I learned about an art program in Texas in Austin called Art from the Streets, where they opened an art studio, just an open art studio for people that were experiencing homelessness. And it became this amazing place where people got to come in and be people, not a name, not a number, just a person who was making art and creating. And over time, and over years, they've been doing it 30 years now. They've had people that have worked themselves through their art off the street. They started with one show a year. The people would come in as artists. They were introduced as artists, not as this homeless person, but as artists. They got to talk to people about their art, and they sold it, and they got 95% of their profits. And so many of them have been able to work their way off the street through their own creation. You will see people actually panhandling with their art, selling their art on the side of the road. That fascinated me. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to do it for a long time, and we were able to start. And I want to add another night. I've had both people, I don't limit it. I have both people who experience homelessness. I also have people who are just housing insecure. If you haven't noticed, Utica is not a wealthy city. It's very high in poverty, and there's not a lot of opportunities for people to do things. So that was one thing, is to start providing, because if you get through an addiction, you have to have something to replace it. And having something to do with your hands and something to make things or create things or build things, we'll start providing that. I have a lot of dreams that I would like to have happen. I've had people who play music. I would love to see someone come in and start a choir or a band or something to start bringing those musicians in. We've had some pretty amazing ones walk through our door. We really want to, at Cornerstone, we're good at education, and we really want to continue that in terms of helping people understand this problem, because there's a big move across the country, even here, to criminalize homelessness. There's, it's the National Center for Law. There's a case now that's going before the Supreme Court, Johnson versus Grants Pass, where they are trying to stop this, just throwing people out because they're homeless, fining people. Can you imagine fining people for living on the street because they have no other place to go? I think it's Louisiana who has a law up on the books where you can use, use like brute force, use some sort of force against somebody who's on your land who might be homeless. In other words, you can start killing people. I just, there's that, and about, there's, California has all sorts of fights with criminalization of homelessness. I get a lot of information from WRAP, which is WRAP. I have resources back there from there too, about some of the criminalization, the sweeps, where they just go in and just sweep people out in all their possessions and just throw them all away. And that can be medicines. That can be, you know, their papers, anything that's left there is just gone, and moving people to where, My daughter lives in Oregon. In the wintertime, they bring people from Portland and drop them off on the coastal cities. They pick them up during the vacation season and take them back. And I guess we're getting close to time here, but I just wanted to say that laughing, remaining calm, trauma-informed care, taking what people tell you seriously without judgment, and gender and culture sensitivity is so important. And there's this little saying that is found in every religion, even the most obscure one, ancient and contemporary. It says, love your neighbor as yourself, the golden rule. And I wonder what would happen if we actually practice that. And thank you for having me. I'll be glad to answer your questions. As you can see, I can talk about this forever.
I don't need this. Thank you, Cathy. Cathy will be, after the service, we'll have a little, we'll bring some chairs up here and she will answer questions and talk some more. So feel free to grab a coffee or tea and come out after the service. And now it's time for our offering. Our offering is a way of supporting our church community, what we value together, and the work, service, and play that we share in. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
I see a sea of empty eyes. Their silence speaks that life's not fair. They feel the weight of all their hunger and the weight of their despair. Well, I can't change the world, but I can live with open hands. I can't change the world, but I can give all that I can. I can pray and I can love. When all is said and done, I can't change the world, but I can change the world for one. Half a world away, or just across the street. May my eyes be open to anyone in need. Well, I can't change the world, but I can live with open hands. I can't change the world, but I can give all that I can. I can pray and I can love. When all is said and done, I can't change the world, but I can change the world for one. I can't change the world, but that I can change the world for one.
And now our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Our closing words come from the Reverend Sam Trombor. Go forth in simplicity. Find and walk the path that leads to compassion and wisdom, that leads to happiness, peace, and ease. Welcome the stranger and open your heart to a world in need of healing. Be courageous before the forces of hate. Hold and embody a vision of the common good that serves the needs of all people.
When I care enough to share my heart, what a chain of caring I can start. All I need to do is lend a friendly ear when someone sheds a tear. To be there is how I show I care. Helping doesn't have to cost a dime. There's no greater gift to give than time. When someone needs for me to hear their point of view, it's something I can do till I've shown they're really not alone. As I travel through my life, I often find a way to show caring and compassion as I go about my day. When I say I care, I mean it too. It's not just in my words, it's what I do. I can feel it in the way my spirit soars when I'm reaching out to yours, being there no matter when or where is how I show I care. It's how